Good afternoon and welcome to Cape Caribbean Studies exam prep session for 2022 exam. Today's session, we are focusing on paper 2 exam specifically, okay, not paper 1. What am I going to do in this session? I am going to start off by explaining the structure of the exam for paper 2. I am going to talk about the different types of exam questions, how marks are allocated for your questions, how to write an essay, and we'll run through some sample questions. I want you all to remain muted. After I run through from number 1 to 5, I will open up the session to take some questions from you all before we start going through our sample questions. So please keep remain muted until now, and when I'm ready, we will open it up. Okay. So let's start by talking about the structure of the exam. You are writing paper 2 exam, and I believe that your exam is next week, Thursday. Yep, your exam is on the 5th, next week, Thursday, and you have 180 minutes to write that exam. You're required to complete 4 essays in that time. The paper is marked out of 100 marks, and it accounts for 33% of the total assessment. Okay, so 4 essays in 180 minutes. When the examiners mark you, they will mark it out of 100 marks, and then they will find a percentage. So your paper 2 accounts for 33% of the total assessment. The exam paper consists of 2 types of essay questions: essay word 20 marks and essay word 30 marks. And the essays, the questions come from module 1 and 2. The paper itself is divided into 4 sections, and you must choose 1 question from each section. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You have to choose 4 questions, 1 from each pair of questions. So type A, that's the 20-mark questions. Section A, module 1, you choose either question 1 or question 2. Section B, module 2, section B questions are based on module 2. You choose either question 3 or question 4. And then you have the type B questions, which are 30 marks. Section C, module 1, choose either question 5 or 6. And then section D questions, which are based on module 2, you choose either question 7 or question 8. Now, I just told you that you have 180 minutes for your exam. Give yourself 10 minutes when at the start of the exam. Don't start writing right away. When you open your exam paper, you read through, take 10 minutes in the beginning of your exam to just read through all your questions and choose which question you are going to do. So put a tick next to the 4 questions that you are going to do. And that 10 minutes, you are just going to write some brief points, your points next to those questions. And there's a reason for that. You don't want that coming after an hour, you start to get tired and you start forgetting. You reach question 3 and you forget what you were planning to write for it. Okay, but you'll have, if that happens, you will have some points next day to remind you as a cue what you were going to talk about. The same thing with, let's say you start running out of time. For some reason, you went longer than 30 minutes for one of your questions, or you took longer than 55 minutes of one of your 30-mark questions. And coming to the end, you realize, oh gosh, I only have 20 minutes to finish an essay. You have some points written next day that will guide you. So don't, when you go into the exam room, don't start writing right away. Take 10 minutes. The 30 minutes and the 55 minutes you see here is what I calculated based on not including that 10 minutes that you have to guide yourself when you enter that room, that first 10 minutes. Okay, so after that 10 minutes, you then have 30 minutes and 55 minutes each. So that's the structure of your exam. What is required for each type of exam questions? Type A questions are with 20 marks. Those are the 20 marks questions that are shorter essays. You are giving yourself 30 minutes each to do 2 of those essays. So that would be 1 hour to do your 2 type A essay, your 20 marks questions. These shorter essays generally test a particular aspect of the syllabus of the topic. So you might see these essays starting with describe ways or explain how. And marks are allocated as follows: 6 marks for knowledge, 8 marks for use of knowledge, and 6 marks for inquiry and communication. Now, the place that students fall short for essays on the whole, for the Caribbean Studies question on the whole, is that they cram a lot of information and they go into the exam room and they just write back information. You just write back everything you know. But that information that you're writing is knowledge. And you can see that the maximum mark you will get for knowledge is 6 marks. So you can write all the information you want, but unless you use that information in a specific way, unless you analyze that information and you discuss that information, there's only so much marks you can get for it. So knowledge is 6 marks, but more importantly, use of knowledge. That is how you use the information that you know, is 8 marks. Okay, and inquiry and communication is 6 marks, and I'll run through what each one of those mean in a bit. The type B questions, which are the 30-mark questions, you have 55 minutes for each of those in the exam. And these questions require exposition of the subject with command words such as, you'll find it started with discuss the role that culture plays in Caribbean society, or you might see assess the extent to which technology impacts on Caribbean development, evaluate the role of culture in Caribbean integration, in regional integration, anything along that line. Discuss, evaluate, assess. Okay, and marks are allocated as follows: knowledge 10, use of knowledge 12, inquiry and communication 8. So again, you may have all the information that you cram off 2 nights before the exam and you went into the exam and you wrote it back. But unless you are analyzing, unless you are using that information in a proper way, unless you are assessing it and evaluating it, there's only so much marks you will get for knowledge. So it is very important that you write, you know what is required in your essays. Okay, you know what is required when you hear those things. Let's look at it. Knowledge is basically comprehension. Knowledge and comprehension goes hand in hand. This is where they are testing you to see that you understand the facts, that you understand concepts, you understand the principles, the processes, the theories, and so on that are covered by the syllabus. Okay, so this is the information or facts which are relevant to the topic. And this is normally students' strong point, because most of the time you all will know the information. You will learn up the information for the topic and you're going to the exam. But it is not so much how much you learn for the topic, but how you use what is relevant to the topic. So that is where use of knowledge comes in. How you use the information that you know for the topic. So how are you going to use your facts and concepts and principles? Are you just going to narrate everything and said, well, religion, culture is defined as blah, 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 blah. And you just keep going. These are the different ways in which culture is seen, and you just narrate and give back the information. That is not acceptable. What you need to do is pull out the information that you know that is relevant to the question that is asked, and to present it in a way that is answering the question directly. So basically, you don't want to just have a paragraph of information with no point to that information, or with that information not speaking directly to the question that was asked. So for use of knowledge, you are required to organize the information as a form of classification. So you might be able to say, on the one hand, culture is important to Caribbean development because, and you might explain why. However, to some extent, culture can actually be a deterrent to Caribbean development because, and you'll explain it. And in that way, you are analyzing. Or you might have something like, while it can be stated that X, Y, and Z are important aspect of development, this point is less important as the point that I mentioned below, things like that. Okay, so you are classifying it. The most important aspect of regional development is. However, another point to consider, which may not be as important but is still significant, is so it is all in the language in which you use. Okay, so students are not going to just regurgitate information. They are required to analyze the information to say which one is more important than the other. Okay, so when we're talking about use of knowledge, those are some of the things that we're talking about. We want to see how you can apply facts and knowledge to answer the questions asked, not just write every and anything that you know. Okay, so you're not just writing every and anything that you know. You are using the information that you learned to answer a specific question, and the information that you put back must speak directly to the question that is asked. Oops, sorry. Inquiry and communication, very, very important. This is where a certain level of critical thinking is needed. And I keep saying it, it's not about regurgitating information. Okay, so for inquiry and communication, you need to analyze and evaluate various sources of information. You need to use various methods of investigation. You know, you might say, well, according to whatever case study that was done on Caribbean integration, and you might refer to it directly, or you might say, one PhD thesis mentioned that, and you might expand on it. Now, various methods of investigation, you would have to be familiar with those based on when you went through the content of the syllabus. So as you were going through the content, you would have been coming across different reports and surveys and so on, different case studies. And it is very important in Caribbean studies that you always give examples. So if you are talking about the impact of hurricane, you must be able to talk about, give specific examples of hurricanes that occurred and how they impacted and so on. If you are talking about what government can do to encourage tourism, you must be able to give example of what have been done so far. And those examples will come from case studies and reports and surveys and scientific research and so on that you were supposed to have done or got through when you went through the content for the courses. Okay, inquiry and communication is also asking you to draw reasoned conclusions. You have to be able to analyze the points and decide which are more or less important and which are relevant. And of course, it is how you communicate ideas, findings, and recommendations, and how you do all this in a very logical format. So your whole essay must flow. You know, you don't just randomly put things there. You have your part introduction, you have your conclusion, you have your body, which we'll come to in a bit. So that is basically what is required. Okay, so it's knowledge, it's use of knowledge, and it's inquiry and communication. And as you can see, it's not about knowledge alone, because knowledge got lower marks are allocated to knowledge when you look at use of knowledge and inquiry and communication together. Let's talk about how you write your essays now. Whether it's a 20-mark essays or a 30-mark essays, so whether it's type A or type B essays, you are structuring your essay in the same way. Every single essay must have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And this is standard thing that you would have been doing since Form 1. So this is something that would come very easy to you. Structuring an essay in a proper format with your introduction, your conclusion, and your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. Now, your introduction is basically one paragraph, one substantial paragraph. And I see a lot of students who write a paragraph with 2 and 3 sentences. No. On the other hand, I see students whose paragraph go on for an entire page. No. A paragraph is normally 8 to 10 sentences. Okay, so you don't want a paragraph that goes on and on and on and on. And because that is taken away from the time. Writing a very long introduction is going to take away from your time to focus on the points that you're going to put in the body of your essay. So you want your introduction to be simple, straightforward, to the point. Okay, so what goes in your introduction? If you need to clarify terms, you might do that in your introduction. If you want to give some background information to the topic, you might do that in your introduction. So for example, if you get a question, how can Caribbean government encourage tourism in the region? You might want to start off by talking about how tourism has always been a very important source of income for the Caribbean. Some countries depend on it more than other countries. You know, you might want to just name some of those countries. You might want to give some background information on tourism on the whole. You know, tourists tend to come in from European and North American countries. The peak time for tourism in the Caribbean is when it is winter, when it's colder in those countries. You know, things like that will go into your introduction. Now, the most important thing in your introduction is your thesis statement. It is very, very important that somewhere in your introduction, you say what is the point of your whole essay. Okay? Because every single thing that comes after that will now speak directly to that. So if you get a question that says, examine the impact of hurricanes on the Caribbean, a thesis statement might simply be, hurricane can have a very severe impact on the Caribbean. Okay, so your thesis question always speaks directly to the question that you are doing, and most of the time you are just saying over the question in your thesis statement. I normally tell students to put their thesis statement as the last sentence in their introduction. So after you put all your background information, I normally tell students to put it as, this essay will examine the ways in which Caribbean government can encourage tourism, something to that extent. If you don't want to put this essay, you can simply say, you can just rewrite the question. Hurricanes has a severe impact on the Caribbean, as will be discussed. Okay, something to that extent. But that thesis statement, it doesn't matter how you write it. The most important thing is that it must be directly related to the question that is asked, one, and it has to be a simple, simple sentence. You don't want your thesis statement to be going on and on and on. Okay, some students, some teachers tell students that they should list the points in the thesis statement. It is up to you if you want to list your points, but listing all the points make your thesis statement very cumbersome. So stick to a short, simple sentence. Hurricanes have a severe impact on the Caribbean. And then when you go on into the body of your essay, every single paragraph will show how hurricane has an impact. So your thesis statement is very important because it guides what you are going to write later on. If you don't have a fixed thesis, if you don't have a straightforward thesis statement, your essay will end up going all over the place. What you will end up doing is just writing information and information, but not really knowing where it's going, not shaping your essay and structuring it properly. So your thesis statement, again, very important. Okay, the body of the essay. The body of the essay is when you do what you say you're going to do. So if in your introduction you had said that your essay was going to examine the impact of hurricane on the Caribbean, the body of your essay is now going to show exactly what the impact of hurricane was. So you start off most by having points to support your thesis statement. Okay, so in the body of your essay, you need to have points to support your thesis statement. Each point will start with a topic sentence. That is, the first sentence in your paragraph has to be what you are going to say. So for example, if we are doing an essay that, let's see, let's get a quick one. Discuss the role of the mass media in Caribbean development. So your introduction your thesis statement might be as general as the mass media plays various roles in Caribbean development. Well, this essay will examine the various roles that the mass media play in Caribbean development. Okay, something as simple as that. Then your first point will be, you might want to look at the fact that the mass media provides information. So you will have a whole paragraph where you talk about information. But the first point in that paragraph, the first sentence in that paragraph is what we call your topic sentence. And you have to list your point in that topic sentence. So it might be something like the mass media is crucial in the provision of information to Caribbean citizens. And then the rest of your paragraph, you're going to say how. You know, information comes somewhere. How does information reach Caribbean citizens? What aspect of the media is used? Things like that. But that first sentence is what I refer to as the point that you are making. So you have your introduction with your thesis statement. You have your first point, and then you go on to explain it. You have your next point, you go on to explain it. Some students find it difficult to keep track of the points, so then that's not a problem. Just say, firstly, mass media is crucial in the provision of information. Secondly, the mass media brings economic benefit to Caribbean countries. Another point to note, in addition to the above point, the mass media is, and that is how you keep flowing your essay. Okay, and that is how you keep track of the points that you are making. Now, we saw where you have type A and type B questions. Type A was your 20 marks, type B was your 30 marks. For the shorter essays, for the 20 marks essays, you need to have 4 to 5 main points that you will discuss. So you will have an introduction, 4 or 5 main points, and a conclusion. For the longer essays, same thing, introduction, but at least 6 main points fully developed, and then your conclusion. Okay, and each point should be developed in at least 1 strong paragraph. Now, sometimes you might be writing a point, you might be discussing a point, you know, the mass media brings economic benefits to Caribbean countries. You might be writing that and you have so much to say. Don't let your paragraph go on and on and on and on. Break your paragraphs into smaller paragraphs if you need to. In that way, your information, your point will be clear. It will be easy to read and it will be easy to follow. So you want to avoid going on and on and on. And nothing is wrong in having 1 point but written in 2 paragraphs. That is better structured than having 1 point that go on for pages. Okay? Always give examples to support your point. So in the body of the essay, in the body of your essay, you are going to have examples to support your points. So after you do that, you will come to your conclusion. So in the introduction, you had said what you were going to do. In the body of your essay, you did that. And now in your conclusion, you are going to say what you did. So far, this essay have, and you may reiterate your main points that you stated in your body. So far, this essay have shown that the mass media plays a significant role in Caribbean development. This is seen through the provision of information, the economic benefit that it brings to the Caribbean, the fact that it encourages a sense of Caribbean culture and identity, and so on. Okay, in your conclusion, you can also make your argument clearer. So if you had started off your essay in an argumentative manner and you had given both negative and positive points to support it, then in your conclusion you can say, as discussed in this essay, as seen above, the positive contributions to Caribbean development are more effective done, and you analyze it there, you evaluate it there. or from what was discussed above, it can be seen that the most important role of the mass media is its economic benefits to the Caribbean. And you can now make your perspective or your argument clearer. And if you had not done it already in the body of your essay, you can say which point was more important or which one stood out more. And well, of course, you can give some general information to close off your essay. So in a question like mass media, for example, you might want to say that, the mass media continues to undergo various changes. Social media have taken precedent today in the distribution of information, something very general like that. And that there is your whole essay. So introduction, body, conclusion. Okay. Okay, let's do some sample essays. So write down these two questions for me. The first one, examine 4 ways in which women have experienced discrimination and how these inhibited Caribbean development. Examine 4 ways in which women have experienced discrimination and how these inhibited Caribbean development. 20 marks. Second one, assess the extent to which religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people. Assess the extent to which religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people. So I want you to write it down because I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, so first I am just going to pause our recording. Our question is, examine 4 ways in which women have experienced discrimination and how these inhibited Caribbean development. The first thing we want to know is what could possibly be a thesis statement for this essay. Anyone wants to try? Just unmute yourself and tell us what you have as a thesis statement. At this point, if there's no right or wrong, if I need to help you shape it properly, I will do that. Okay, so feel free to say what you have. Nobody? Do I need to start picking on you all? So examine 4 ways in which women have experienced discrimination and how these inhibited Caribbean development. So I am going to start with Anura. Anura, what would you have as a thesis statement?
Well, I'm not sure, but I have this essay will examine the economic, social, cultural, and political effects of discrimination on women on Caribbean development.
Just repeat it. We'll examine the...
This essay will examine the economic, social, cultural, and political effects of discrimination on women on Caribbean development.
Okay, so that is really good, but that left out one part of the essay. So the first part of the essay is the ways in which women have experienced discrimination. Look at the essay again, right? It's a 2-part question. The ways in which the women have experienced discrimination. So, and then how it impacts on development. You have the impact part done. You have the impact part really well done. But we have to also talk about the ways in which they have experienced discrimination. So what you can do is you can make it very general and you can just basically repeat the question. So it could be something like 4 ways in which women have experienced discrimination will be examined in this essay, or something like, if you want to list them, like how you have listed them, that's not a problem as well. If you want to list them, you can say that the ways in which women have experienced discrimination are, and you list them, and these have impacted on, have a sentence, continue the sentence to link it to the impact. or how it have prevented discrimination development. So you can be very general, and you could simply say that this essay will examine the ways in which women have experienced discrimination and show how this have impacted on Caribbean development. Yeah.
Yes, Miss.
Anybody else want to tell me what they have? Anybody else want to give me an idea of what they had? So I will know if anybody not sure about what they have. Let me rephrase that question. Yeah, anyone else? Danica, are you there? What did you have?
Miss, mine was similar to Anura's.
Okay. You want to read it out for us? You muted. Okay, let's move. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
This essay will discuss how discrimination has affected women on a cultural, economic, social, and political level.
That's good. Cultural, economic, and social what?
And political level.
No, you have to finish off. It started off really strong. You just had to finish off strongly. And the ways in which it have impacted development politically, culturally, and socially. Something to that extent. Okay.
Yes,
so,
Miss.
Mikhail, go ahead.
Good day, Miss. In this essay, the forms of discrimination faced by women will be explored, as well as how this discrimination may affect development in the Caribbean.
That is excellent. That is an excellent thesis statement. So you say you include both parts to the question. So great. So now what are the points that we will put for this essay? So we want to talk about how women have experienced discrimination and how it has impacted on Caribbean development. And they want 4 points. Can someone give me one? Mikhail, start us off.
Pardon me, Miss.
Sorry, say that again.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, tell us 1 point. So we're moving on to the body of the essay now. We have the thesis statement, we're moving on to the body. Give me 1 point that you will write.
Firstly, women may face sexism, which can negatively impact the level of social development.
Excellent. Karishma, you said gender equality. Tell us the full point. So that's a very good point that Mikhail gave us. You want to repeat it? 1 minute, Karishma. Mikhail, you just want to repeat it so that they will get it in case they didn't have it?
Sure, Miss. Firstly, women may face sexism, which can have a negative impact on the level of social development.
Okay, very good. So we had 1 so far. Karishma, tell me the second one with gender inequality.
Pertaining to like the workforce, women will be seen as like a more lower level than men, and men will have more advantages.
What I want you to do is tell me it in 1 full sentence that you will start off your paragraph with. So you're telling me exactly how you're going to write it. You understand?
I think so. Yeah, I could try.
Try it. That's okay.
Women face gender inequality. A discrimination faced by women is gender inequality, which has negatively impacted the development of the Caribbean. And I didn't think of the rest.
Okay, so anybody else had that point on gender inequality? Anybody had a point on gender equality? So Macy,
Yeah, miss.
okay, go ahead, anyone.
I had firstly, with respect to gender equality, women would be denied certain educational opportunities by certain schools, which can hinder the economic development of the Caribbean.
Excellent. So you understand how you are starting off your point, and then you will go on to explain it, right? That is the main thing I'm trying to get across to you, that you have to write your point properly. The first sentence in your paragraph must be that point, and then you go on to explain it. What I find happening most of the time is students will have this long, big write-up, but because you didn't have a topic sentence, it is very difficult to say exactly what you were trying to get at. So that is the main thing, that you write that topic sentence, that first sentence, and then you go on to explain it in detail. So for example, your points might be, women experience discrimination in the workplace, and this can affect productivity level. You might have a point like that. Okay, so women experience discrimination in the workplace, and this might affect productivity level. Or you might also have a point that says, women are discriminated against through wage disparity, which will impact negatively on economic development. And then you go on to talk about how the whole gender imbalance between wages and women are paid less and so on. Okay, so you might also have a point that we talk about sexual inequality already. Any other points other than those that we mentioned so far? I think we mentioned 4, but any other points? So Macy, I just mentioned your point, so you didn't have to say it in the end, that women are paid less in the workplace. Okay, any other point that anybody had that they want to share with the rest of them? Daniela.
Hi, Miss. I was thinking something along the lines of gender roles, where like the patriarchy expect women to like be in the family and do family duties, and they're not expected to go out into the workforce and contribute.
So the point is employment opportunities, or the point is contribution, economic contribution? Tell me and I'll help you state it.
Just let me think a second.
Those of you who are messaging me directly in the chat, send your message to the whole group, to everyone, so they can see your points as well. Okay, so Artie and is it Makaya? Let your points, send it to everyone so everybody can see the points that you are making. Don't send it to me alone. Yeah, Daniela, say it again now. With the point in mind.
Okay, I'll try. So women face discrimination by the patriarchal society, as they are expected to, only do familial duties and not contribute to the workforce, thereby preventing them from contributing to the development of the region.
Okay, so let's make it more direct. It could be a point like, women are discriminated against within a patriarchal system, and this can impact negatively on a country's development. That's what you had in mind?
Yeah, miss.
Right, so you see all the other things you were saying about how they expected to be at home and all that. That is your explanation. That is what you are now going to put in the rest of your paragraph. So your topic sentence is just one direct sentence that says exactly what it is, and then you go on to explain it in the paragraph. Yeah, I love this point that Danica has. Because of gender stereotypes, or as a result of gender stereotypes, women are limited in their ability to develop as individuals. And I will stop there with the point, Danica, and then you go on to explain that. So what I'm trying to get you to understand is that you have to say your point and then go on and explain it. Otherwise, you will end up all over the place with your essay and you will find yourself writing and writing. But when the examiner reads your work, they are going to be confused. Most of the time, examiners will be, well, what is it the student is trying to say? Oh, I understand what a student is trying to say, but they're not saying it properly. Okay, so you want to have your thesis statement, you want to have your points very simply put in the topic sentence, and then you explain the rest of it. So in this last one that Danica put in the chat, as a result of gender stereotypes, women are limited in their ability to develop as individuals. And then you go on to talk about all those gender stereotypes. They believe that women are not as strong as men, or that women are supposed to be taking care of the home. And then you talk about all the stereotypes, and then you go on to talk about how that has an impact, how those stereotypes impact. So you are organizing each point in a paragraph with your topic sentence, which is the point, and then you're explaining it. And within the explanation, you are giving examples to support it. So that is what you need to do in all your essays, in all your paragraphs that you are developing. Let's go on and try another one. The second question that you had to write down for me. Before I go on, anything anyone wants to ask about the first question, or anything that you wrote down that you're not sure about, now is a good time to ask, okay? No? Okay, number 2, assess the extent to which religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people. So you have another question for 20 marks, which means that you need 4 points, 4 or 5 points max. Okay, so assess the extent to which religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people. You're doing 1, you're writing a thesis statement. 2, you are writing your 4 points to support your thesis statement. Each one of those points have to be one simple sentence. So you're writing it out as a sentence. Okay, and I'm giving you 3 minutes to do that. 3 minutes. I am pausing again. Our question is, assess the extent to which religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people. 20 marks. Assess the extent to which religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people. What do we have so far? Thesis statement. Let's start with a thesis statement. How has religion continued to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people? Mikhail.
While religion may certainly influence Caribbean people, other social institutions must also be considered.
Why?
Pardon me, miss.
Why? Why do we need to consider other social institutions?
Religion is just one. There are other social
But
institutions.
the question isn't asking about others. It's just asking about religion. You understand? The question.
Oh, it's a trick question, miss.
No, it's not a trick question. You are thinking too far ahead. So the question is simply assess the extent to which religion continues to be a dominant force. So you are focusing on religion and religion alone. So we now have to look at all the ways in which religion dominates the life of people in the Caribbean. That's basically what the question is asking. The question is asking you to talk about the ways in which religion continues to dominate life in the Caribbean. And remember, it's 20 marks. So you're just focusing on religion. Okay, you're not focusing on anything else. So for this question, it's basically saying how religion continues to dominate Caribbean people, the life of Caribbean people. That's basically what it's saying. So we have to stick directly to that. Josiah, tell us what you want to say. thesis statement. I see it in the chat, but I want you to tell us.
To read it out?
Yeah, just, well, we were looking for the thesis statement. So what would you write as a thesis statement? You can read out what you have and we'll shape it.
Okay. Due to Caribbean people's strong faith in religion, there's also a reason.
Breaking up, breaking up. Say it again.
Hear me better now?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. Due to Caribbean people's strong faith in religion, there is always a reason to not implement any motives or ideas that are against their beliefs. Thus, in this essay, there will be an assessment as to why this is the case.
Okay, you started off. That's exactly what you wrote in the chat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So due to Caribbean people's strong faith in religion, there's always a reason to not implement any motives or ideas that are against their beliefs. Thus, in this essay, there will be an assessment to why this is the case. Not direct enough. You need to speak directly to the question because, okay, I'll explain it in a bit if you continue to tell me what you would be looking at when you look at that, when you have that thesis statement. What are some of the things that you will go on to talk about?
Well, I believe there's like fear rights and stuff like that. People are against it.
And that's when you will run into problems. So what you will do in this particular essay, you will start off by talking about, you see how you said Caribbean people have a strong faith in religion. You can mention all that as your background information for your introduction. Generally, throughout the Caribbean, religion have always had a strong prevalence. This goes back to the time of indigenous people, straight until the Europeans and the enslaved Africans and so on. So religion has continued to dominate even till today. Okay, so that would be the kind of background information that you want. And you can talk about, sorry, go ahead.
I'll say yes, miss.
Yeah, and then you will continue in your introduction to talk about, you might even want to mention what are the main religions that dominate. Maybe so what are the main, what are some of the main religions that dominate, and then you will simply say that religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people, as will be shown in this essay. Or religion continues to be a dominant force in all aspects of the lives of Caribbean people. Simply keep your thesis statement simple, and in this case, it's general enough that when you go on to the body of the essay, you can now have all the different ways in which religion continues to be a dominant force. Okay, so your thesis statement will just be the question repeated in a different way. This essay will show how religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people. Simple as that. And then in the body of your essay, your first sentence, your first point might be, religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people through education. And you can talk about all the main churches, all the main religious groups, and the fact that they run schools and how their curriculum is influenced by religion and things like that. Or you can even mention the fact that you have the school term is centered around official religious holidays, such as Easter vacation or Caribbean Christmas vacation. So that is just one point. Your point will be its impact on education. The second point might be the impact on religion on a sense, giving people a sense of identity. And you can talk about how groups and communities come together. You use examples of things like church groups, different things, anything you can think about. Make it personal to you if you can't remember things. Okay.
Yes,
the other thing that you might put is one of the ways in which religion continues to be a dominant force is through gender roles or gender issues. and you talk about how gender roles are determined by religion, how you have different behaviors expected for men and for women, the stereotypes that we have existing in our country, in the Caribbean, things like that. So when basically this question is asking you to look at how religion, how the impact of religion on life of Caribbean people. And you just keep the thesis statement simple, and then each point will speak directly to it. One way in which religion continues to be a dominant force is through gender inequality. Or one way in which religion continues to be a dominant force is through education, through identity and cultural issues, things like that. So basically, your thesis statement would be religion continues to be a dominant a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people, or religion plays a very important role in the lives of Caribbean people. Anything along that line. Okay. I mentioned some of the points. Did anybody have any of the points that I have not mentioned? Is there anyone who wants to give us some of their points that they will have? How does religion play an important role? I said one, through education. The second one was through identity. It gave them a sense of, it gave Caribbean people a sense of identity. The third one is through gender roles. It impacts on gender roles.
Yeah, so they would have one with how like historically European or like some religions were used to like suppress certain cultures. So you could talk about like stuff with cultural erasure and how like when Europeans came to the Caribbean islands, how they suppressed certain religions and cultures.
Okay, so what's the point?
Like how like different religions, well, how different cultures would be erased due to certain religious practices brought by European people.
And how are we going to, what are we going to say in the rest of that paragraph? What are you going to say in the whole paragraph? Remember, if that's the point you're making, you have to develop it into a strong paragraph. What else can we put in that paragraph?
Right, so you could talk about like how Western schools, well, when European schools incorporated Caribbean students, you could talk about how in the schools they were taught Western literature and religious practices, and they were told to forget their traditional, well, their local traditions and embrace the foreign religions and practices.
Example.
You could, well, not really have like a known example, but you would have one of the points for that.
Right, so that's the problem right there. If we can't give examples, then we don't have a strong point. You understand? So we have to be able to back up all our points with examples of what is existing in the Caribbean today. Because the question is asking you to examine the assess the extent to which religion continues to be a dominant force. Now, you could have said, we have been going so far with all the ways in which religion continues to be a dominant force. Somebody might have decided to say that religion is not a dominant force, which is actually harder to argue because it is a dominant force. So if you cannot give example, if you make a point and you don't have any example to support that point, your point will come across as very weak. Okay, Justin, that's an excellent point. Religion can serve, or religion serves as a moral guide to the way persons lead their lives. That's a very good point. And you talk about, you expanded by talking about all the ways, all the moral part of it. You know, people, women are expected to dress in a certain way. It dictates certain types of behavior, and so on. And you give example, for example, in Christianity or in the Roman Catholic Church or in the Hinduism, in Islam, and so on. So it's very important that you only write points that you can actually support with examples. Mikhail, you had a question. You had your hand up.
Excuse me, Miss. Are we allowed to incorporate theories from sociology?
Which theory do you think will apply in this case?
Well, in religion promotes social solidarity and a sociologist by the name of Malinowski. He's the one who said this, so I could cite him.
Right. So you see how you said the point in the beginning that religion gives a sense of identity. And then you go on to explain how it gives a sense of identity. And within that explanation, you can say, according to sociologists, you say the name, you say in theory, so and so and so is the case. This is especially seen in the case of the Caribbean where, and you give an example to support the theory.
Yes, Miss. Thank you.
That helps? Yeah. So I think you all have some good points to this question on religion, but let's write them down quickly. Let's just list our points. So if we'll make a very general thesis statement along the line that your thesis statement would be religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people, right? That's your thesis statement. Religion continues to be a dominant force in the life of Caribbean people. Your first point, religion plays an important role in education. So your first point, religion plays an important role in education. And as I said, you go on to talk about the fact that all the different the large religious organizations have their schools, and they may also teach their religion in their curriculum. The school term is centered around the religious holidays such as the Easter holiday or Christmas holidays and so on. You give examples of those. For example, Diwali, Eid, all these things are holidays. Schools will get the time off. You talk about things along that line. You also talk about, when you're talking about education, you talk about that it is through education that we promote things like moral and cultural development of individuals and so on. You know, the fact that morals and values are taught to children through education. So that's your first point on education. The second point, religion plays a dominant role in gender issues. Religion plays a dominant role in gender issues. And you talk about how religion determines gender roles and how you dictate behavior, certain behavior for men and women. You know, the fact that you might have different kinds of stereotypes, and you give examples of them. Okay, so that's your second point. The third one, religion continues to be a dominant, religion plays an important role in identity formation. The third point, religion plays an important role in identity formation. And you talk about the whole thing that people identify with certain aspects of the group that they belong to, with certain morals and values that they are taught, with certain ways of living and so on. And you include all that under identity. The fact that religious organizations have a strong presence in the community, whether it's Hindu, Muslim, Roman Catholic, whatever it is, you use the examples that you know. So that would be your third point. Your fourth point, religion religion plays an important role in health and diet. And for example, examples of these would be Rastafarianism and Hinduism, which promote vegetarianism. The whole concept of, you know, cleanliness is next to godliness. All those things come under that. All the examples that you could think about, the fact that it promotes so many of those religions, such as Voodoo and Obia and Spiritual Baptist, they promote herbal medicine. During Lent, you have fasting. During Diwali and Ramadan, leading up to Diwali, Ramadan, you have fasting, all those aspects of health. Okay, as well as under health comes their own indigenous forms of medicines that they would have passed on from generation to generation. So those are your 4 points that you will be you will be looking at. And you can also add, Justin had a fifth one here, that's a very good one. Religion can serve as a moral guide to the way persons lead their lives. Okay, and then you talk about all the other examples you can find. The whole attitude towards the LGBT movement and the role that religion plays in that. So you have lots of examples and you put them under those main points. You all have a good idea of what I'm talking about. Am I totally confusing you all? Everybody okay?
Yes, Miss, understand.
Okay, so let's do, so those were two 20-mark questions that we ran through. Those were the 20-mark questions. And the 20-mark question is normally about 4 points. Now let's try to do, let's run through a couple of the 30 marks question, because that one you will be required to analyze in a little more detail. So I'm sharing my screen here. And I want you to write down these 3 essays that I have here. Write down those 3 essays. Critically assess the role of the mass media in the development of the Caribbean. Discuss the ways in which discrimination can impact on Caribbean development. Discuss the ways in which globalization affects the development of the Caribbean. All of those are 30 marks. We're going to start with number 4. Discuss the ways in which discrimination can impact on a country's development. So for this one, you are writing your thesis statement, and then we need to get 6 points, at least 6 points for them. Okay, it's a bigger question. It's a question that you have 55 minutes to do in the exam. So discuss the ways in which discrimination can impact on Caribbean development. How does discrimination actually impact on Caribbean development? So you are writing your thesis statement and you are writing, you're coming up with as many points as you can get. Hopefully we can get 6 points. We'll come back to the other 2 questions when we finish this one. I'm going to take down the screen in a few minutes. I'll stop sharing in a couple of minutes, okay? Keep the thesis statement general and just leave it at this essay will discuss the ways in which discrimination impacts on a country's development, on the development of the Caribbean. Okay, simple as that. Now, we are now going to look at how it impacts on Caribbean development. Anybody? Give me one way. How does it impact on Caribbean development? Josiah said, 1, discrimination of women, whereby in the past women have a lower likelihood of being exposed to educational opportunities. Unlike men, thus the productivity rate on workplaces are low. Right, I like that whole thing that you're trying to say, Josiah, but I want it stated in a point, because right away in that little sentence, you have there, 1, it's too long, it's too cumbersome, and you have too many things happening there. The point you are trying to make in that sentence is that it impacts on productivity. So let your point be, discrimination can have an impact on the productivity levels of countries. Or discrimination can impact on the productivity levels of Caribbean countries. You understand what I'm saying? And then you go on to explain what you mean by that. So when you continue to talk about it, you can talk about gender inequality. And that will be one way in which it impacts on productivity level. And you can talk about all that and you can give examples. But the point you are making is that discrimination can impact negatively on the productivity rate or productivity levels of Caribbean countries. And then you give all the ways in which it can, or that can happen. It can happen through gender inequality. It can happen through racism. It can happen through ageism. Anything along that line. Right? So your point is, you see, if you put in the point as discrimination of women, that's not your point. You are limiting yourself there. Your point is it impacts on productivity levels. And that's what I want you all to understand. This particular essay is not asking you to just list all different types of discrimination. This particular essay is asking you to show how discrimination in general has an impact on the Caribbean, and then you use the different type of discrimination as your examples, right? So you can do it as that. So your first point was it impacts on the productivity level of Caribbean countries. Very good point. Wait, Josiah had another one. Let me go back up to his point. Women being unable to work at white-collar jobs. So all that comes under productivity level, okay? So that whole gender discrimination thing will be a good way in which you can develop the point on productivity level and a good example of how discrimination impacts on the productivity level. So that's good. Makia says discrimination against members of the lower class can lead to an increase in poverty levels in Caribbean countries. So again, we don't want, the point you are making is that there can be an increase in poverty levels. And then you give examples of how that can happen. And discrimination against members of the lower class will be one way. So your second point is discrimination can lead to an increase in poverty in Caribbean countries. Okay? Discrimination can lead to an increase in poverty in Caribbean countries. That is the point. And now you talk about all the different ways in which that can happen. That can happen when we discriminate against members of the lower class. That can happen when we have racism and classism. That can happen when we have sexual discrimination. You have lots of examples of it. But the point is, it can lead to an increase in poverty levels. And this is where you can get trapped with this essay, because you will start off your point by talking about the type of discrimination as opposed to the way in which it impacts. So far, both of the points that Makia and Josiah said, they started off with the type of discrimination. You don't want to start with the type of discrimination. You want to talk about the impact. It impact on poverty level. It impact on productivity. And then you go on to use the different types of discrimination to explain that. Okay? Discrimination can impact political stability of a country. That's the next good point. So that would be your third one. It can impact on the political stability of a country. And for that one, you could talk about things like racism. You could talk about classism and how that may slow political development. You can talk about poor governance. So that would be your third point there. It can impact on political stability of a country. Very good, Danica. Okay, Amber says sexism. When men report abuse, physical abuse, they are often looked as weak. They may hinder the individual human development and may prohibit the individuals. Let me just scroll down. From achieving their full potential among situations of abuse. So Amber, you need to start the point with the point you're making, not with the type of discrimination. So the point you are making is that discrimination may have a negative impact on human development. That's your fourth point. discrimination may have a negative impact on human development. And then you talk about how. How does that happen? That happens when sexism occurs. That happens also when we have ageism. You know, we have this belief that older persons are no longer productive, or that the young generation youths, for example, cannot make a viable contribution. So then you go on to talk about all the ways in which it may impact on human development, and you give all the examples. So you are not starting your point with the type of discrimination, you are starting your point with the impact of discrimination. Okay, we already had the point on productivity levels. Thank you, Chrisara. Discrimination, Simran says discrimination can mentally affect a person in a negative way. As such, it will impact negatively on human development. Good. So that's a good example. Well, a good point to develop that point we just said on human development. It can impact someone's mental health. Okay, very good so far. So Amber made the point about classism. Some people of the lowest classes in society are discriminated against, and this may be mentally draining and hinders or prohibits an individual's development. Again, that goes into your point on human development. Selena has a good point. Discrimination can prevent unity amongst people of different races or religion. So I wouldn't put it as that. I will simply say, I will actually put that under human development. So racism, Selena, would be a good way to develop the point on its impact, its negative impact on human development. Okay, so you all have very good examples, but what you are not doing is putting your point across properly. And that is where you will lose your mark. You need to write your point and then go on to explain it. Another point can be, and I haven't seen any, we mentioned productivity level, but we could actually have a point that says discrimination can affect economic growth of a country. Sorry. Discrimination can affect the region's economic development. And under that point, discrimination can affect the region's economic development. You can look at all types of discrimination as an example. You can pull examples from any type, from ageism, sexism, racism, gender inequality, anything you want. And last point could be that discrimination can lead to high levels of migration from the Caribbean. Okay, and in this case, you can talk about sexual discrimination, women who are educated but cannot get jobs in high positions, who may seek jobs abroad. So you might have brain drain. You might even be able to talk about racism in countries where racists feel that they are discriminated against and they don't have access to political power, economic opportunities. They may seek to leave. You can also talk about discrimination against persons with disabilities because they don't have equal access to opportunities. They may seek to migrate to other countries. So that's your fifth point. Discrimination can lead to high levels of migration. And we need 6 points. So your last point will be discrimination can have a negative impact on the quality of life in the Caribbean. Discrimination can have a negative impact on the quality of life in the Caribbean. And then you talk about things like high crime levels because of an increase in poverty or because of classism. You can talk about things like society not based on merit. There's more focus on race and so on. So all those things can come under quality of life. When you're talking about under quality of life, you can again mention the fact that sexual discrimination or gender discrimination or sexism can have a negative impact on the quality of life of women, on the LGBT movement, persons from that group, persons with disabilities. So lower the negative impact on the quality of life of all those. So I hope that you get what I am trying to say, that don't focus on the type of discrimination to start off your point. Focus on the impact and then use the various types of discrimination to support the impact, that the point that you're making on impact. Okay, otherwise you will run into problems with developing your points. If you start off by saying gender discrimination can impact on Caribbean development, you will run into problems, because then you will have a hard time showing exactly, unless you have statistics to show that because 100 women were not employed, this is how much the GMP was lowered. Unless you have that kind of information, you are going to run into problems. So a question on discuss the ways in which discrimination can impact on Caribbean development, look at impact, and then use the different types of discrimination as examples to support those impact that you're talking about. Okay, questions so far? We have some time to do one last question. So we're going to do number 5. Discuss the ways in which globalization affects the development of the Caribbean. So 2 minutes, your thesis statement and some points. Discuss the ways in which globalization affects Caribbean development. So our question is, discuss the ways in which globalization affects the development of the Caribbean. What would you put as a thesis statement for this? Right, I like this one that Selena put in the chat here. Globalization has both negatively and positively impacted the Caribbean region. This essay will state how it has done so. I will rearrange it, Selena, to make it more straightforward. You can end by this globalization has both negatively and positively impacted on the Caribbean, and you can leave it as that. Or you can say what Simran said, globalization has been seen, actually no, globalization has both a negative and positive impact on the Caribbean, as will be discussed in this essay. Okay, so you want to keep it one flowing, simple sentence. You don't want to have a 2-part sentence. Simran says globalization has been seen to be a growing factor in the Caribbean, as seen in recent times. There's too much as seen in there, Simran. Okay, so you want to say that this essay will focus on its effect on Caribbean development. Simply stick to that. This essay will focus on the effect of globalization on Caribbean development. Simple as that. Okay, so leave it as that. This essay will focus on both negative and positive impact of Caribbean development. Sorry, of globalization on Caribbean development. This essay will focus on the impact of globalization on Caribbean development. Anything along that line, and you are fine. Now, the thing with this particular essay, you have a question that is asking you, discuss the ways in which globalization affects development. Unless you say in your thesis statement, this essay will discuss the ways in which globalization positively impact on the development of the Caribbean. If you say that, then you can only write the positive impact. If you say this essay will examine the ways in which globalization negatively impact the Caribbean, then you can only write on negative. If on the other hand, your thesis statement is a general one where you say that this essay will examine the ways in which globalization affects the development of the Caribbean, then you have to give both negative and positive. Okay? And it is you can't write a whole essay on the positive or negative only. You can't. You have enough points to write that. But because it's a 30-mark question, it is always better to look at both positive and negative. And if you are looking at both positive and negative, you need to have equal amounts of points. So I started off by telling you for the 30-mark question, you need to have 6 points. In this case, you need to have at least 3 for negative and 3 for positive. And then you have to, this is one of those essays where you now get the opportunity to compare and contrast and say which one far outweighs the other. If the positive impact was much more visible than the negative impact, or whether the negative impact was more visible. But it is very important in this essay that you do that. So let's say you start off your essay with all your introduction is all your background information, defining globalization and all those things. And then your thesis statement is, this essay will discuss the way in which globalization affects the development of the Caribbean. Then you might start with all the positive things, you know, globalization impacts on the economic development of the Caribbean. And you talk about things such as free trade and trade liberalization and elimination of barriers to trade, removal on restrictions of goods and removal of restrictions on the movement of goods and all those things. So you might have that as your first one. Your second one might be globalization can lead to stable governance. And you could talk about how, you know, because of globalization, Caribbean countries are under pressure to maintain stable systems of governments and so on. You might also have a point that says globalization is important to the development of e-commerce in the Caribbean region. And you talk about technological development and buying and selling products online. All those things can be positive impact. When you finish deal with the positive impact, you can go on to the negative, but this is where your analysis comes in. So you don't just jump into it and say, well, there are also negative impact. You start to analyze it. So far, this essay has shown all the ways in which globalization have actually impacted positively or helped or assisted in the development of the Caribbean. However, there are also ways in which globalization may have negatively impact on Caribbean development. And then you go on to talk about the negative impact. You know, we could have things on the negative impact. We could talk about exploitation of labor. One of the negative impact of globalization is the exploitation of Caribbean labor. And you talk about how they are paid less, they're not given top positions. If the company closes, you have increase in unemployment and so on. That might be one negative. Another negative could be the commercialization of culture. And you talk under the commercialization of culture, you talk about things like cultural erasure. The fact that you now have foreign cultures coming in and taking precedence, and so on. So that might be a second negative. Then a third negative, you can talk about the environmental impact. The fact that you often have damage to ecosystems. You might have pollution of all types. It might be a hazard to things like mangrove and coral reefs and so on. So you have your 3 points of positive and you have your 3 points of negative. Now, in the conclusion, it is very important that you evaluate them against each other. As discussed above, globalization has both a positive and negative impact on Caribbean development. When the points are analyzed in detail, it can be seen where the negative factors far outweigh the positive factors. And you're going to talk along that line. On the one hand, while globalization have helped to develop Caribbean countries, and you have all the way, at the same time, it can be seen where globalization have actually created, and you talk about the bad things. So this particular essay, whenever you get an essay that is general, you focus on both negative and positive, and you make sure that you use argumentative language throughout. What are argumentative languages? On one hand, blah, 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 but on the other hand, at one level, it can be seen. However, at another level, it is obvious that. Okay, that is the kind of language. When you write in that way, it shows that you are analyzing And it shows that you are discussing and you evaluating one point against the other. And that is what is needed for you to get that mark for use of knowledge and the last one, the last heading that we had. So it is very important that you examine and you analyze. Otherwise, what you will end up with is low marks for inquiry and communication and low marks for use of knowledge. Okay, so it is not just, in this case, it is not just writing back all the information about globalization. It is about analyzing the different ways in which globalization impacts on development, the positive and the negative, and making a stance that yes, this one is more important than this one, or negative far outweighs the positive. So it is at this point in your essay that you are required to give, to come to a conclusion. Which one is more important? Why is this one more important? Okay, so you will know the information. I am sure that you have covered the topics in your classes in school. It is now how you use that information to answer your questions so that you can get as high marks as possible for every single essay that you write. Yeah. Okay, I am going to stop there. If anyone have any questions, this is a good time to ask me your questions. First, let me stop recording.